Thanks for listening to That Great Mank Pod. Please do us a massive favour and subscribe to this podcast. And if you can, leave us a review on iTunes. Both are a massive help, enabling us to promote the people and the great causes we champion to a much bigger audience. If you want to get in touch, give us a follow on Twitter at Great Mank Pod and drop us a DM. Cheers.
You're listening to That Great Mank Pod, Greater Manchester's community podcast. Top one, kid.
We want to tell the stories of real people who do amazing things, you know, and Trafford Veterans is top of that list for us. You know, incredible people that are out there that are part of this organisation. We just want to tell their stories. So this is part of a process. We sent the forms out the other week. We're doing some of these recordings and we'll extend it. What we want to do eventually is put on an exhibition.
Oh, fantastic.
Which will include memorabilia, photos, people's stories, all sorts of stuff. So, but it's a process.
Thank you.
I think it's always good to start any of these that we're doing. If you can tell us who you are, you know, a bit about yourself, maybe where you're from, where you grew up, and you know, I'm interested, and I'm sure other people are interested. What kind of drove you towards the services? So if you could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Haywood, which is in Lancashire, although it might be categorised as something else now because the boundaries have changed. And I kind of always had sort of itchy feet, and I was always interested in the outdoors. And I found out we had a local territorial army centre, which was the drill hall in Bury. And I just went and signed up, and I spent 8 years with them. But I also worked for the MOD, and I was like PA to a captain. And then I eventually got married to somebody that was coming out of the army. They'd done a degree, and then they were moving back into the RAF. So I then went on a journey with our family, sort of like moving all over the country. So sort of like, Lincolnshire, Suffolk, Germany, High Wycombe, and you know, through that I ended up doing lots of other types of work with the military. Worked for the Army Youth Service, did inspections, which were part of like Ofsted overseas, registering childcare provision and childminders for preschoolers. And that was all on behalf of the MOD. So I travelled like the Rhine countries and further down doing inspections with that. And also supporting SAFA. I did the SAFA training. So I worked quite closely with families. And so when we eventually moved back as a family, I knew then that was the type of work I wanted to continue in. So I worked for a military charity, which is where I actually met Claire. And then that's when all these like Veterans Association breakfast things, kind of the ideas for these were starting to be formulated. The charity we were working for at the time wasn't interested in it. So Claire just ran with it. And Chris on board and other different people like myself, you know, trying to support it and literally build it up from grassroots, because we could see, you know, there was that community need. Yeah. Because I myself had found that transition from sort of like that military background to Civvy Street really hard, you know.
So in terms of your earlier service, so how old were you when you were you a regular or reserve?
So reserve, right. 8 years, and then,
And how old were you then?
So I probably would have been about 27 then when I actually went into that, and I think I would have liked to have gone in the regulars, but life doesn't always work out like that. But yeah, exactly, yeah.
So what was the regiment?
So it was 5RRF, which later became QLR, but we didn't take that on board. We refused to wear the badge. We were 5RRF through and through.
So what does that stand for?
So it's the 5th Regiment of the Fusiliers. Royal Fusiliers.
Oh, of course. So the Berry.
Berry, yes.
Oh, of course.
Right. In history, absolutely.
No, my uncle was a Fusilier.
Right.
And they formed when we did one of our festivals in Berry.
Yeah.
They were They have got an amazing museum there, and
they have. One of my friends who was in the Territorial Army with me is the curator of that museum, the Fusilier Museum, and also was a Fusilier himself. Paul Dalton.
I might have met him.
Paul Dalton, yeah.
When I went down, was he an ex-RSM?
No, he didn't go into the regulars. He's got a bit of experience actually as an S-type attachment with the medics.
Right.
But previously he was in 5RRF, and he was actually also the caretaker at the Castle Armoury where we trained. So that is the Bury Drill Hall.
Well, yeah, I mean, Bury's got a huge history. Yeah. With the feather.
That's it. With the hackle.
Yeah, the hackle. Yeah, not the feather. I said.
Yeah. No, it's okay, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
No, that's exactly what happened when I was down there. But the feather, they went, it's not a feather.
No, it's not. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We're very proud of the hackle. Yeah.
So, can you explain, in terms of a reserve, what does that encompass? What do you have to do for that?
Yeah, well, it's actually quite a commitment, because you've got to actually attend so many training weekends a year. And there's a specified amount. I don't know what it is at the moment, but at the time it was like 8 training weekends a year, and then you had to attend like a 2-week annual camp. But most people were quite dedicated to it and put far more in than that, because as soon as you're enmeshed in the military, it becomes a way of life, and that's like your surrogate family. As you know, and for that you would get what was called a bounty, but you had to earn it. And actually, even when you had done your quota, it was always at the discrepancy of the captain or the SPSI that was actually stationed with our unit at the time at Bury, and that the SPSI changed every 2 years.
Right.
So yeah.
They had to see that you were putting the work in, which is, which is how much was the bounty back then, by the way?
So it was £1,000.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And of course, you had to get sort of like permission, kind of like from your employers, effectively. You know, that if you did go away, because you could go on these short-term S-type engagements, and there was an agreement, but not all employers would do it, but an agreement that your job would be held for you when you came back, because, you are a reservist, you're doing something for the country. It's still Her Majesty's forces, so you should be entitled to come back and still have a job. That wasn't always the case, though. So back in the day, then it was a bit difficult, So a lot of people did actually then find, because of the employment problems, that they would transition into, the regular services.
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories on that, and it's only really when you look into it, because the I've never served, got family members and friends who have, but it's a big interest in several things, a big interest in it. And then when you speak to reserves, and you kind of think, well, they're serving, it's Afghanistan, Iraq. They were doing tours. They were doing tours over there, and I think that's a misunderstanding that people need to be aware of, because
absolutely, because your training is just the same as the regulars, perhaps just not as intense. Because I was part of the last group of sort of like women that trained with the regulars down in Guildford, so you had to keep up with them, so the training was, it was parallel training to what they did, just not over the same length of time. And basically, if you screwed up on any aspect of it, you were just RTU'd, returned to your unit, So you really had to be sort of like physically prepped and psychologically prepped for that.
Did you do any? Did you do any postings? Did you take advantage of that if you could do at the time, or?
I didn't, no, because I was like in my day job, I was teaching at the time, and I think I'd started doing a teacher training course, so I was kind of like embedded in that. And then what I did do, somebody went off that was working for the civil service on behalf of the MOD within our unit. And I was asked, because I kind of like worked in admin and recruitment, so I knew the system, would I cover that maternity leave? So at the end of it, I got offered a position to go, I think it was over to barracks in Blackpool and actually take on a permanent job, like with the MOD as a civil servant. So it was a bit of a, what do I do? Do I stay with the teaching or do I go with that? Do you know what I mean? And at the time, I chose the teaching because I thought I got the best of both worlds because I was still a reservist as well.
How did the kids kind of take that on board? The fact that when you said, I'm a trained soldier.
I don't think they kind of could fully comprehend it. We used to tell a silly story, and it had happened by accident. When I became pregnant, and I was still in the TA then at the time, I ended up not knowing, obviously you both got like similar uniforms. My husband had come out of the army, he's going through university, he's still a reservist. So the camouflage gear is around at home. And I just picked these pants up and put them on. And then I'm looking over the balcony and one of the lads said to me, "It's to do with your Robbie." And I went, "What do you mean?" He said, "He's mincing around on the drill hall floor, isn't he?" And I went, "What do you mean?" And he went, "It looks like he's got something stuck up his arse." And a bit later on, my husband comes up and he went, "Have you got my pants on? My combats?" And I went, "Oh, I don't know." I said, mine actually feel quite comfy." He said, "Well, mine bloody don't." So the kids thought that story was hilarious, you know.
Yeah. So you were in the reserves, and then was it? You say your husband got?
He eventually went into the RAF. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And what was he doing in the RAF?
So it was sort of like satellite and communications, that type of thing. Yeah, yeah.
And that's where you went from. This is the thing that really, I mean, it all interests me. Don't get me wrong, but
I know.
The going from serving yourself to then being on the other side with the family, and again, I've heard some absolute horror stories in terms of how the families are treated, just in what you class as basic logistical places to live. It isn't a shithole, you know, and stuff like that. So how did that open your, because you obviously you knew the army, you knew how they operated, but did that really open your eyes when you were the family supporting?
Yeah, definitely, because we'd had a few postings already, so we had a few under my belt. Was getting a feel for it from that family side of things. And then my husband got a posting to Germany. And to cut a long story short, there's a saying in the military: hurry up and wait. You know, so 1 minute you're doing something, and then the next minute it's paused.
Yeah.
And it can happen like that kind of thing. So we got sent to Germany far quicker than we thought we were going to be with two young children. And within landing, effectively, my husband found out where he was supposed to be working in the base in Germany. He was actually being put on a detachment, and he went out to Afghan. So literally, we landed on this base. He went. So he was not part of like the base we'd come from, which was the RAF regiment in Suffolk, because he'd left there. But no, he wasn't part of the regiment side of things, you know, in Germany. So nobody was kind of like knowing who we were. I had to find schools for the kids. Obviously, there are schools on bases and things like that. And I just threw myself into like learning German and just had to like get on with it. We didn't know a soul, you know, literally within 2 weeks, he was gone. And I can remember one day somebody came round, some officer, and he said to me about the grass in my garden. And he said, we usually want the gardens to be nicely maintained. And I said, right, okay, that's fine. He said, I'm just approaching you. He said, because, your grass looks like it's getting a bit high. And I said, right, okay. He said, can I speak to head of household? I said, speaking. And he said, yeah. He said, no, the head of household who is with the military. And I just said, well, I've got military service. I said, my husband's away. I said, so I'm afraid I am that head of household, so you will have to speak to me. So he wasn't happy. It was very patriarchal, and he started talking about, what I needed to do. And I just said, so I've got 2 young children. I said, and we're neither with this base nor the base that we came from. I said, so if you want to find somebody to help do those tasks, I said, that'd be, really gratefully received. And he just said, oh, no, we can't do that. And I said, well, I'm afraid I can't help you then, and just shut the door in his face. And then somebody later, when I got to know people, said, oh, do you know who you were speaking to? I said, I don't care who I was speaking to.
Oh, I like you.
Yeah, I've been a PA to a captain. You know what I mean? I've been a PA to a captain, and so you quite often get, people coming in to the drill hall that were pretty obstropulous about things.
Well, you've got that kind of military thing, and also the fact that sexism, which I'm sure is quite open in many things, but certainly. Back to an organisation that's old and structured like that.
Yeah, definitely. And like the unit that I was in at the drill hall, 5RF, there was only 5 girls within our unit. It was 120 people in strength, but only 5 girls. So you had to really stand up for yourself and prove yourself to the unit, for them to actually accept you. So that guy was like nothing to me.
I bet he's still. I bet he's in a pub somewhere going, do you know what? There was this one woman. She said she was really rude. I've never gotten over it.
No, I mean, there was one incident as well. I think when I was at the drill hall. And I can't remember. So we'd been told we'd got to do something, and it was all a big rush, like it always is with the military. And we were all sat down, the unit, the 5 girls, the lads, and all the rest of it. We just come off exercise, and it had been wet, and everything's muddy, and you're cleaning your rifle, and I'm ranting away while I'm cleaning my rifle. And apparently, my sergeant said, "I've never seen anybody clean a rifle so meticulously and so quickly." He said, whilst you were ranting as well. It was like,
You can multitask then, Tracy.
Yeah, a bit.
I mean, me and Paul often have this conversation. I mean, we see these like strong women awards and things that go around. I'll probably get in trouble for this, but I said to me and Paul often talk. We were surrounded by strong women growing up. My gran, my mum, my aunties, they kept us in our plate. I mean, really kept us. I grew up in Clayton, Paul grew up in Moston. His gran, was important to him. But my gran was a crane driver in the ward, the very high-rise cranes.
Amazing.
What incredible women we have everywhere, especially in Manchester and in the north.
Totally, yeah. And people just forget what they've done. And that was all part of the backbone that, kept that infrastructure going when we were going through the war. If we hadn't have had those strong women doing these tasks,
people have got very short memories when it comes to people doing stuff in the community. I mean, we saw that with COVID when we all. And I'm not going to talk about it again, but I mean, when we all came together and everything else, we can be amazing when we need to, and the nurses and everything else. And then, people have just got, a few months later, they're having to go at the nurses and doctors again. But I mean, that's where we live. Yeah. I mean, the charity, the Manx Spirit charity, is a mental well-being, mental health charity. So that's kind of the key into everything. We just want people to talk, and start a conversation. And I'm sure stuff that you're saying will, with everyone, there'll be people out there where it'll ring a bell and it'll make them think of something. It might make them have a conversation that, put some on a route to doing something positive. You never know. But in terms of you personally, and obviously, I know this it can be quite a delicate, subject to talk about it. I don't talk about it, but I'm curious, when you're in that position that you've served, you know what you've done, you know what you've contributed, and then you're with your husband, so you're probably seen more as I'll say it, a second class citizen, and there's you and your kids, and you're on this base, and you're having to do this. How did that impact your mental health at the time? Can you is that something you can talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to talk about that. Yeah, it created sort of like a general anxiety disorder. I know, ironically, I actually work in mental health as well myself, and went into sort of like training for that. So just completed a degree. But because there was nobody then to talk to. So it starts off with anxiety, but it soon can transition into sort of like chronic depression, and it's quite insipid and a slow burn. You don't always know. I was like trying to go to the gym when the children were in school, but I was trying to work at the same time, and you're trying to juggle everything and keep the house going, and it's not easy. It's not. And then when your husband comes back home, or your partner, whoever it might be, that's difficult then, because you're dealing not only with your emotions, but the emotions of the children. Because you know that they're only back for R&R, so that's 2 weeks. And then it all starts again. They leave again, and you go back to that process, right back to the beginning again, trying to maintain everything, make things stable for the children, whilst maintaining a certain presence, for yourself, because you don't want the children to see you upset, and there were some days where, it was hard to get up some days. Really, because you've got no support around you. I had no family, no friends, because we'd only just arrived on that base. So that one in particular I found quite hard.
And was there no attempt at all to offer any kind of support to you?
Integration, social,
not in that particular instance, because we'd left the RAF regiment, so we weren't classified as being part of the strength. And because we'd arrived in Germany, but my husband hadn't took up post there, we weren't part of anything out there at JHQ either. So effectively, you're kind of like the unknown populace.
In limbo, aren't you?
Yeah, in limbo,
well, that's totally contradictory to when the army or any of the services sign people up and tell people they're going to be a big part of this big community with camaraderie and everything.
That's it.
You couldn't get further from that at the time, could you?
No, because before I started working for the Army Welfare Service, I actually did some volunteering with them, and they kind of like took me under the wing. But the RAF had nothing for us, but military families that came, through the army postings, they were immediately signposted to the Army Welfare Service. So trips and activities were put on for them. There didn't seem to be anything for the RAF. There was no representative for them. And so if you got posted out like I did with my husband and the kids, that's it. You were effectively in no man's land. But I was lucky that I was volunteering with them, and they took me under the wing, and then we were invited out on some, of the activities that they would do, like taking kids to amusement parks, and they'd get a coach, and, it'd be a bunch of effectively what looked like single parents, with the kids going off on a day trip. You didn't really know one another, but it was better than being on your own.
But that transitional life as well, it's not easy for you nor the children to put down roots or make connections anyway, is it? So those social groupings was even more important, really.
Yeah.
It was a chance for you to whinge with the others about the kids and your husband and things like that. That's people need to do this, but also a chance for the kids to have some social interaction themselves,
They may well be looking at, and they don't look after the soldiers or the service people as well as they should, but at least they're in that bubble where they are getting some kind of, and all the support structure, the people that help them do their job ultimately are not getting looked after. You mentioned before we started recording that when you were in Germany, you then got involved in offering that support to other families through what organisation was that with again? Sorry,
so it was with the Army Welfare Service, and then I'd done some work like within the creches and the preschools, and I eventually went on to sort of like be an early years officer that was like basically registering different childcare provisions around all of the bases throughout the Rhine country to make sure that they were, they were working like Ofsted to Ofsted standards effectively, even though we were overseas, so that families could be secure in the mind that if they were putting the children into childcare, it was going to be okay.
So your teaching experience then become invaluable, didn't it?
It did. That's what sort of like fed into that. Yeah. And all the kind of like work I've done. Because if I take something on as a volunteer or whatever, I usually end up qualifying in it. Because I just have to go the whole hog. I don't know why, but I just do. So if I was working in a nursery or a creche, I had to get the childcare qualifications. And then that's how that early years officer position came about, because I had the knowledge, so you could go and do the inspections then.
Which explains your recent degree.
So what happened? Again, it's the same thing, knowing that there is this need in other people, and having walked in their shoes, so to speak. I went to the University of Bolton and I studied psychology, psychotherapy and counselling. And I managed to get a first in that. I'm not entirely sure quite how. Thank you. And now I'm working with, so that's led me into working with, you're probably aware of like all the listening lounges that are sort of like set up around Manchester, which are meant to kind of like alleviate the NHS, because there's been a lot of data that seem to indicate that people with mental health problems were presenting at A&E between the hours of 3 p.m. and 1 a.m. So in order to improve access to psychological therapies, these listening lounges were set up, and effectively they're like crisis centres for people.
Triage.
Yeah, that's it. So people can ring up on the day and come, and you never know what you're dealing with when you're picking the phone up.
I think really that's incredible. It's a really positive step. That, I mean, my partner's she's a matron in the hospital.
Yeah,
and I've asked the questions about it because I've worked with prisoners, I've worked with homeless, I've worked with. I said, how many people in your actually in a day in your A&E are mental health, and how many are physical?
Yeah,
and she said it's pretty much 50-50.
I would say so as well. Absolutely.
So that backlog and that slowing it through, because it is. I've sat with people for 5 hours waiting to get a mental health place.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly hard. And that's basically, that's blocking up the whole system, because there isn't anything specific for people to just, me and Paul have said it. There are places out there, and he said, and Trust in Ashton's fantastic. Sometimes people just need to walk into somewhere and have a brew and a chat.
Yeah.
They don't need any more than that. You know what I mean?
No, it's true. And I think, like when you were saying that your wife said it's about 50-50 with physical ill health and psychological health, the two are enmeshed. I mean, if that's what we can bring from the military, because we know, if you're having issues with housing and issues with childcare, then it's going to affect all other parts of your life. Eventually, it might not initially, but if you're not getting the support and you start to become disenfranchised, from the unit that you're with, because you're not acknowledged by anybody, because your head of household has been detached somewhere straight away, it does, the complex problems just become compounded till in the end.
You've been isolated immediately, haven't you?
Yeah, that's it. And it is no different, I feel, in sort of like Civvy Street, because, the body does actually keep the score, Yeah. So, most of those people, it's interesting that you say it is 50-50, and I can believe that it is, because it'll be environmental stresses, not just internal stresses that people don't have control over.
Do you know
one of the reasons we've done this project now, and is because the more people we were talking to that haven't been in the services that are affected by the Ukraine,
absolutely,
because it's actually made it's brought it to the doorstep, and after the pandemic, people's mortality and everything they've been faced up with it.
Yeah.
So we thought it was incredibly important to do something to talk to people who've been through the services, previous conflicts, how they cope, how they get support, how they've overcome, the inspirational stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people out there who are terrified of what's happening in the Ukraine and what might happen, beyond that. So that's another one of the reasons. So it's fantastic to hear these people like you out there, Tracy.
Well, and the same, like with you guys as well, that is awesome work, because it's actually, you're bringing life stories to the reality of it, the bits that people don't hear. They hear the news. I mean, that's kind of like what happened at Bolton University when the Ukraine war broke out. There's lots of people on our course, that were from the Czech Republic, all them areas. So they all had contacts, and we banded together to try to support them people. And then again in lockdown, I mean, we had a family member die within 8 weeks with cancer. But at least when they were passing, I could go to hospital to see them. I had friends from the Ukraine that I was at university with, and people died and they couldn't even go back because of lockdown, and now you've got the war, and I just felt profoundly sad and had so much empathy for these people, so when they gained the degree with me, they were just, it was like they'd won a battle themselves.
Yeah.
No, you did right. The people forget in all the facts, figures, news items, there's real people involved here.
Yeah.
And that's what you did right. That's what we're trying. It's social commentary. It's a snapshot of what we're all going through as well.
Do you know what it is for me as well as and that's the inspirational side is massively important. There's always got to be some degree of hope, and we all know it can be bad, but there's always hope there. But it's what I love about the forces and people that are all the services out there is that level of practical sense, which is very, very lacking in so much of society. It's that logistical, right? We've got a problem. We won the war on logistics, didn't we? I mean, the second, it was like, we've got a problem. How do we solve it? I tell you how we solve it. We get people who are in the armed forces, and we get them to sort that problem out, because it's black and white. They'll fix it.
It's true.
And they'll use that common sense. 100%.
Yeah.
But that can be really useful. And everyone knows we lack. You may well be lacking in other things, as we all are.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you can bring that. How many people out there who served, who go to the Trafford Veterans, and Damien's brought this up numerous times. have got something really, really valuable to offer their communities. And I don't just mean volunteering, to get paid.
No, that's it.
To sort shit out.
Yep, it's true.
And probably start to think, well, I don't really know what I can offer. You can bring loads of stuff to the communities.
Totally.
And that's what, again, what we're trying to bring out. But can you tell us how you got your involvement with Trafford Veterans?
Yeah, so I was actually looking for a charity, which was a military charity in the Rossendale Valley, and that's where I met Claire and Chris, and obviously that military background and that banter just connected immediately, just connected. And when our charity wouldn't take on any ideas that maybe we had that we felt, would benefit the community, because we were listening to the community. But the charity had the funding through like 5 CCGs. But if it wasn't the criteria for the funding, they wouldn't do it, even though the community trend indicated we needed that.
It pisses me off so much. We come across that all the time.
We've been
really annoys me.
Well, I've been in the charity sector for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And even before we set up Manx Spirit. And
yeah,
I've always said the easiest way to deal with these things is just ask people.
Yeah. That's it.
Don't be a missionary. Don't turn up and have this missionary approach that you know better and you know what people need.
It's true.
Actually, sit down and have a chat and ask.
Yeah, because the greatest gift, I think you hit the nail on the head before, about hope, is actually, I believe, and I say this when I work with people when they're in crisis, the greatest gift we can give anybody is our time and to just listen and hold them, literally just not physically hold them, just in a place of psychological and physical safety, hold them whilst they get over the crisis, and that gives someone hope. That is the gift of listening and the gift of hope.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tracy, most of the time people just want to be heard, but truly heard, not somebody waiting to ask a question or somebody to have their say, but truly sitting there and hearing that person, I think that gives someone ultimate value,
That's it. Not somebody swooping in as a missionary and taking it over for them, because maybe that places that person, in a sense where they then perceive themselves to be a victim.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the days of Damien and I swooping in anywhere, long gone.
Stumbling.
Yeah, mine are and all. Yeah,
stumbling. Yeah, then they're stumbling and just getting pushed in.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I like the fact it was that. So basically, you looked at Trafford Veterans and you thought, because I mean, listen, let's be honest, there must have some things you thought, all right, well, no one's perfect, but I really like the fact that you get shit done.
Yeah, we've got it. That was it. It was just a case of we've got to do it, and it was like Claire and Chris that ran with it, but with the connections that we had in the valley. Another guy, he set up Haslingden Veterans Association, and then we just started to band together. They'd come to our breakfast, we'd go to theirs, and then eventually one person knows another person, and it just and literally, like you said, that's the difference between Trafford Veterans and a lot of charities. They do get things done, and they're listening to people at a grassroots level, and they're following community trends. They're not just taking the book and doing what the directive says, and the quarterly figures and this, that, and the other.
Well, it's this. Yeah, no, I was going to say it's this. We'll give you this money to do that, to do this. And you go,
they forget what they're about.
We need to do that. No, but we're giving you the money to do this. Yeah, but we need to do that. Yeah,
no, that's it.
Very frustrating. Very frustrating.
This is it. I quite often, I mean, even with where I work now, I can sort of like bang my head on a brick wall sometimes, because I'll say, show me the data that tells me we need that. But it's a central directive that's coming down from government, and
focus groups. It's focus groups.
Yeah,
that's what it is. But again, and it's one of the biggest benefits to me personally in my mental health is with the Great Mank Pod, knowing, well, you always know there's people out there doing good stuff. And if you really try, you can find out where they are. But none of us, life gets in the way and stuff like that. But
it does.
But it's finding people like you. It's finding people like Trafford Veterans that are actually doing that, actively doing really, really positive stuff and dealing with all the nonsense that comes with it, but doing that in the communities. Has it been? Would you say that getting involved with Trafford Veterans has been beneficial for your mental health?
Definitely, I would say it's been a lifesaver. When we moved to Civvy Street, I got diagnosed with complex PTSD, which at the time, when the psychologist was telling me that's what I've got, I said, I can't have complex PTSD. I said, soldiers have complex PTSD. And this, that, do you know what I mean? And he said, no, let me explain something, so it's about shattered assumptions, the world that you thought was the world that was safe and could be trusted now isn't because of that one event. Yeah, and so Trafford Veterans for me became a lifeline. And even though I work in mental health and I am aware of the things that I do, they all start off as coping mechanisms, whether it's self-medicating or whatever. I don't need to name it. I know you know it. And like one of the things I will do, and I think it stems from the life I've lived on military bases, when I'm going down, instead of reaching out and asking for help, I go, as Claire puts it, AWOL. And that's because you've always, as a military wife, had to fend for yourself.
Yeah.
And if you do get friends and support around you, you've got no control over when they're going to be posted away. So you've got to be resilient. You've got to be adaptable. You've got to be able to diversify. But actually, sometimes we internalize that so much, I find I go to ground. I can't always see I'm doing it. So it clearly has become a maladaptive coping mechanism. These guys, they check in. They tell me when events are on. They pester me to death. Till in the end, I've got to answer. And they drag me out of it. And I don't know where I would have been but for this. I'm going through quite a torrid divorce now. They've been my rock. They've been my rock. It's
Tracy, you used the word earlier, and the same word come up in the last interview: banter.
But there we go.
Dark humour and trench humour, or whatever you call it. But your real mates are the ones that can take the piss out of you when you're at your lowest.
Yeah,
because it snaps you out of it.
They do. You know what I mean? And it's very much needed. And say if you do end up breaking down or getting upset, and this goes for the men as well, there's no questions asked because everybody implicitly knows you and understands it. You don't have to say it. You can just show it. These are the emotions, and then we're back to that banter again.
It's humanity at its best, and I'm not belittling anything, but it really isn't complicated, which is why it's so frustrating. Just show a bit of time for each other.
Definitely.
And we can all have our moments to do otherwise, but just show a bit of compassion, and it's amazing what it can.
It is. It's as you say. It gives people that gift of hope. Things can change. If you've just made one connection and somebody's listened, that's the gift of hope.
Well, you know what? I couldn't think to end it on a more hopeful ending than that. Listen, it's been fantastic to speak to you.
You are an amazing person.
Yeah, you are, mate.
Thank you. Well, equally, I want to say to you guys, you're bringing to life the hearts and minds of people. That's what you're conveying. That's what you're putting out there, breathing life into the hearts and minds.
I'm just thinking, if someone came round to my nan's house and said, who's the head of the house? Oh,
could you imagine?
She'd have lamped him.
Yes, absolutely. The frying pan would be out or something, wouldn't it? Ding.
She'd still, well, I mean, she's not with us anymore, but she would have been in Strangeways, and she'd have been quite, but it's.
Yeah. I think I would have liked her.
She would have liked you. Honestly, she would have really liked you.
Thanks for saying that about the Arts and Minds, because we go to we're part of GMCA Culture portfolio, and there's loads of big theatres and big players in there, and we're always saying, and probably to their annoyance, it's about Arts and Minds, not bricks and mortar.
There we go. That's it.
And for you to say that without any prompting, believe me, listeners, we haven't given her a script or anything like that. That's fantastic for me and Paul to hear.
And if it makes no difference,
thank you for saying that.
Listen, if it makes no difference with those kind of organisations, it makes a huge difference to me and Damien when we're having shitty times, and we get them, and we know that we can. Well, I mean, I know Damien's doing an awful lot with you guys anyway, and we're planning to take this particular project as far as we can take it. Right, we'll leave
and
you
if I can help you in any other way, just shout out. Yeah.
Oh, mate, you've really cheered me up today, Tracy. This has been an absolute pleasure.
You guys as well, because I didn't know any of this was going on. So, hey, what a bonus. And I've had a veggie burger as well.
I was going to say, I bet you've been sat there with an half-eaten sandwich in front of you for the last 45 minutes, hour going,
oh, no, food's a priority. I did shove it down. I'm military, I can eat quick if I need to. Adapt and diversify, you see.
Yeah, that's our motto.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, cheers, guys. Really good to speak. I'll get Claire back in for you now, shall I?
Yeah, brilliant.
You have a fantastic weekend.
Yeah, you too, guys.
See you, love. Thanks for listening to That Great Mank Pod. Please do us a massive favour and subscribe to this podcast. And if you can, leave us a review on iTunes. Both are a massive help, enabling us to promote the people and the great causes we champion to a much bigger audience. If you want to get in touch, give us a follow on Twitter at Great Mank Pod and drop us a DM. Cheers.
You're listening to That Great Mank Pod, Greater Manchester's community podcast. Top one, Arky.